All right. Good timing. How you doing, friends? This is 0 days to expiration, and this is the Final Hour Show. And today, we're going to look at what's up with the Fed and what we can expect tomorrow, and whether or not that is going to affect zero DTE trading. Well, I'm glad you liked the intro. It has been... It was, never mind. I'd hope to have an outro at some point too. So anyways, we are going to talk about the Federal Reserve and whether or not that will affect zero DTE trading and how it might affect zero DTE trading. And what is the effect of any kind of binary event like that? All right. So let's first of all think about, these different types of binary events and what they actually mean. I mean, everybody knows what the Fed rate hike means, and everybody has a set of expectations. Even with our expectations, when we come up against an event like that, implied volatility tends to rise into that event. And as implied volatility rises, the price on the type of trades that we trade, which is a butterfly, tends to get reduced. And so that presents a unique opportunity to get in with a better risk to reward and at a better price. And that's the case with just about any day, because as a general rule, implied volatility is rising into the day. So, for example, the things that would make volatility rise are unknown events. And the open of the market just about every day is kind of an unknown. You have some ideas of what's going to happen based on what's happening in the overnight markets and the futures market. You also can look at the economic reports that come out just prior to the market open, the overall general sentiment. All of that stuff can have an impact on what's going to happen going into a market session. But still, it's still an unknown, because I've seen pre-markets that look like we're going to just take off once we hit the open. You're on like a ski ramp, and then all of a sudden the market opens, gets a little blip, and then goes straight down. And of course, the other way too. So you never really know what's going to happen. But what you do know is how volatility is likely to act. And that's super important when it comes to zero DTE trading. Because with high volatility, as I said, the strategies that we generally trade are the butterfly. And with the butterfly, they are termed a Vega negative trade. What that means is that as Vega or volatility is dropping, if you're in a butterfly, then you benefit from that by an increase in the rate at which premium decays. And as a result, it's rising inside of the butterfly. So your position is becoming more valuable. So we know that happens as volatility drops. Now, generally, when people are looking at butterflies, they're looking at it from a longer term point of view. And that's how they're looking at it. But when you're smashed up into that very last day, there's a different dynamic that's going on. Whether volatility is rising or lowering, by the time you get near the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, because the only thing that matters at that point is time. Time is fixed. No matter what happens with volatility up or down, it's going to have very little effect on the rate at which volatility or premium is decaying or not decaying. The only thing that's going to really take hold at that point in, say, the last hour, 2 hours, is time. Time is just totally trounces volatility. So you just don't have to worry about it. However, in the beginning part of the day, it can make a substantial difference in terms of the cost of your trade. And so that's important. Now, you may think that, well, what about, price movement and that type of volatility? Is, what if the Fed surprises and the market, shoots up or just spikes down? What do you do then? Well, even then, we don't really care that much, because first of all, we go into the day with a fixed risk. We know exactly what our risk is going to be. And whether the market goes up or down or stays the same, our risk doesn't change. Now, one thing that could change prior to us getting into the market is the amount of risk that we might want to take. So generally, we're putting on these asymmetric trades that have asymmetric risk to reward. And basically what that means is that we take very tiny risk and are going for a very large potential reward. With the butterfly, you can look at that as being about 1 to 9. 1 part risk, 9 parts potential reward. Now, what are the chances of us getting the 9 parts reward? Pretty small. Something on the order of 5 to 8%. But that's big enough, because even if we're within 10% of that area, which would give us a much higher percentage of being able to get a good fill or a good return, it's still going to return us 70 to 90% of the total premium that's there. So you don't have to pin a trade in a butterfly to make a lot of money. You just have to be somewhere close. I mean, who wouldn't want to take $800 home on a $100 bet? So the key, though, is capital efficiency, and that is at what price can you get in on. So before I go any further, as I talk about this, I'd like you to go to the thumbs up, give this video a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed, subscribe. And then I'll give you the rest of the story. All right. So the type of things that we're looking for when we get into a trade really isn't that complex. We're not really worried all that much about where price is going to go. And particularly with our Batman trade, where we're putting something on both sides of the market. So we have a trade above the market and a trade below the market. And so if we're expecting a lot of volatility or a lot of movement in the market, that's good, because we're pretty far out of the money. And so that means that there's a really good chance that our trade will end up, or the market will end up, somewhere inside the profit tent of one of those flies, either the one above or below, or it will get close enough that we can take a pretty good trade. Now, in a day like Wednesday, next week, with the FOMC, I think it's Wednesday. I'll have to check on that. On a day like Wednesday next week, there's going to be a fair amount of volatility building up for that day. Now, what will be unusual about it is that volatility will stay at a fairly high level right through the morning and into the afternoon, because they don't announce their rate hikes until about 2 o'clock. And that's kind of unusual for the typical day, because what happens on the typical day is that volatility rises into the early morning hours, maybe 9:30 into 10:30 or so, about 10:30. By then, volatility is done and it starts falling off and leveling off. And then it peaks its head up a little bit near the end of the day in what they call the power hour. So that's the only difference between Wednesday and any other day, is that because the event is in the middle of the day, or actually in the early afternoon, that volatility will stay elevated. So what that means is that we can take our time actually getting in, and you can get into a trade just about any time, where normally we would like to get in early in the day to take advantage of that heightened volatility so we can get a good price and get the best risk to reward, the best capital efficiency. But since the hammer has been moved further into the day, volatility will stay elevated, and we can actually get in maybe at 11 o'clock or even noon, or maybe even at 1 o'clock. So that's going to be the big difference. Now, if there's a general consensus about what to expect with the Fed, I guess it's possible that we might see something unusual. So maybe the entire market is, a little bit lax on what they expect. Maybe they're just so confident that volatility just drops. I'm sitting here and I'm watching. What caught my eye when I was looking over there was Tesla. Tesla is on a tear today. Unfriggin' believable. But anyways, all of a sudden it's like they were profit takers and they just took some profit, but who knows where that's going to go. Tesla's a big story in our economy. And I think that the way Apple has been in the past 10, 12 years, I think you're going to see Tesla take the same place that Apple once held as the most valuable company in the world. And I think that you're going to see as Tesla goes, so does the rest of the economy goes. So right now we're seeing that resurgence after that fantastic earnings report that they had. And the total sea change that they are producing and that the mainstream media now is taking notice of. For whatever reason, there are a lot of doubting Thomases thinking that Tesla was all done, but that's an old story. Now Tesla is on track to be really the sole supplier of EVs going forward. With their price cuts, they have basically priced everybody else out of the market. Nobody else is making a profit. And Tesla has a huge lead, both in manufacturing and technology. And so, it has just been remarkable to see Tesla actually, well, I guess you could say that it's up about 70% since mid-December or late December. 70%. Is that right? 70%? Man, let me figure this out. So what was the low? I'm sorry I'm getting off on this, but this is just unbelievable. So what was the low? 105? All right. Oh. I was doing a calculator on my phone, so now I got to switch to the calculator, Ernie. So we're currently at, say, 180. Yep. 71% return since December 28th, when I believe that was the low. 71%. I want you to know that I backed the truck up in mid-December and just went all in. So I'm feeling good about that. But, I think the biggest story is really what Tesla represents going forward in a wide range of areas, not just the automotive world, but also AI, energy, and technology in general. So, I think that Tesla will be the next Apple for this coming decade, easily, maybe even beyond. Yeah, a guy saying up 35% this week alone, but it is up 71% since December 28th. 71%. in 1 month. That is just nuts. All right. Well, I don't understand it either. I really, it's like people's brains took a back seat or something when they were looking at Tesla and making up these stories about demand and all that, when all you had to do is just read their annual reports, and they're doing exactly what they said they'd do, and they're actually beating their numbers at every turn. And they're doing things like no other technology company. Here's the other big thing, and this kind of folds into the discussion of the Fed, and that is that all these big tech companies now that are laying off, like Microsoft and Amazon and Salesforce and Meta, and they're all laying off, and they're laying off huge, really big. Now, this is super significant. One has to wonder, are they laying off because they don't really need, even Google has laid off recently, so that they don't need that extra weight? And how are they laying off? That's what I'd like to know. How are they laying off? Are they doing it random, so as to be politically correct, I guess? I don't know why. If I owned a company and I was going to do a layoff of 10 or 15,000 people, you damn well better believe that I'm going to lay off the least productive people possible. Absolutely. But I heard that someone said at Google, there was a meme just recently that kind of followed up on the TikTok or the Twitter meme of that person that was going to work, and it was just all sunshine and rainbows at work. And I don't know if they actually get any work done. Someone did the same thing at Google, showing how lush their work environment is, and then they followed up just a few days later. I guess they got fired, but they were saying that they were part of a random, or they say it was a random layoff. Now, this is from the perspective of the employee. They could be all filled with themselves, and from their perception, it may have been random. But I can't see why any company that wants to survive, and obviously they're getting rid of these people for one of two reasons, well, maybe a few other reasons, but they're potentially looking at what's coming down the road in terms of the economy, recession, slowdown, that sort of thing, and so they need to pull back, and so that they can have more cash on hand. Cash is going to be king going into this recession. The other possible reason is that they're looking at what Elon Musk did at Twitter by getting rid of about 50, 60, 70% of the staff and actually improving operations after getting rid of that many people. There is so much dead weight out there. And I'm sorry if that butt hurts you, or if you're one of those people that got laid off. If perhaps you proved yourself and showed that you were worthy of being kept on, then you'd still have a job. But you don't have a job right now because you're a lazy ass, right? And you probably deserved to get fired. Probably a snowflake. But that's not a political statement at all. I'm talking about people that either you have self-initiative and you're in there to do a job and you're there to put your all into it, or you're there to collect a paycheck. And, I feel bad for people that got laid off, but quite frankly, you've made your own bed. It's as simple as that. And I think that whatever we're going into, if these companies are all forecasting tough times ahead, then it's going to be a tough road. I mean, I guess there's UBI to look forward to, right? Universal Basic Income. But anyways, this is going to say a lot about our economy, what the Fed will do in the coming months, and how they will behave, whether or not they're going to continue with their rate hikes. I mean, they've got to now see this massive amount of layoffs that are starting to pile up, and that's going to be huge increases in the unemployment rolls in the coming weeks. They say that the Fed's mandate is to ensure maximum employment and price stability, when in fact it seems that at every turn the Fed is doing exactly the opposite. So again, how does this affect us here at Zero DTE? Well, quite frankly, it just presents opportunity. Wonder who the dog's yelling at. It's going to present incredible opportunity for us, and that's because elevated volatility means cheaper options. Cheaper options means more capital intensive, more capital efficient trades. Now, just because an option's cheap, that doesn't mean that there's less profit. As a matter of fact, it's the other way around. When an option is cheap, the width of the option, the maximum profit, does not change for us. It's the same. The only thing that changes now is that we can get into these options at a much better price. So typically what we do is we take our positions early in the day because that's when volatility is heightened. And some days it's really heightened and some days it's kind of suppressed. But either way, we like to take it in the morning. And there's not much thinking about it. Getting into the trade is a relatively easy thing. It's getting out of the trade that really tells whether or not you've honed your craft and you're disciplined, that whether or not you have fear of the market and how you approach it, whether or not you do well or not so well. And that's what we teach people here. How to approach the market without fear, because you are able to design and define what your risk is and understand what the odds are of you getting a return and maximize those opportunities when we're within profit-taking distance. So we don't have. I'm surprised that we don't have a lot of comments yet in the comments section. I don't know if you have any comment on that, or if there are people that are within our group that have something to add to that. But that's generally how it goes. So our basic trade these days is, I guess you could call it a market neutral trade, but it really isn't. It's really two directional trades. And the reason why we put on two directional trades, that might seem a little odd. You might say, well, why don't you just pick a direction and then go that direction? Well, I used to think that way. I used to think that, I could outsmart the market, or I could figure it out. With enough analysis, looking at the macroeconomic condition, I could develop a bias and then choose one way or the other. And that worked great in 2021 when the market was going straight up. With all that quantitative easing, you get a few pullbacks, you buy the dip, you go up again. But these days, in 2022 and now in 2023, it's not that way at all. We're continuing with this bear market. We're in a bear market rally right now for all that I can tell. And the market isn't going in one direction. Back then, you could pick a direction and it was up, and you'd be right 75% of the time. These days, it's very difficult. And no matter how much analysis that you do, the best I've been able to muster is 54% right, win rate, going in the right direction. And that's with all the advanced geo-macro analysis. So we just don't even do it now. Now, we say, screw it. We'll just go both ways, right? Because our risk is so small, we can afford that. We're still capital efficient. We're still taking 1 to 9 or better risk to reward on our trades. And we still have the opportunity to return huge returns. In fact, in this new market, we're finding that the frequency at which we get near or somewhat close to a pin trade, which is one of these huge outsized returns, has actually increased. Now, there are some markets or some periods that it just doesn't move for you. This past week has probably been one of those periods where things are just kind of subdued. And that's probably because we're leading up to the FOMC rate hike, which right now, according to the Fed Watch tool, is a solid 25 basis points. The big question is, what is Uncle Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, what is he going to say after the rate hike? What is his narrative going to be? How is he going to handle the presser and their questions? What is he going to be a super hawk now that all of these companies have shown their hand and said, "Hey, we're doing mass layoffs now, Jerry. Hey, it's your move now." Will he keep the pedal to the metal? Will he provide some sort of forward guidance that says, yes, we're going to hold the line here, or we need to get to 5%, or we need to get above 5%? I mean, that's generally what he's been saying. And I think that if that's the message that he brings forward, the market is not going to like that. It's not going to like that at all. As a matter of fact, the market is looking at these layoffs as actually a good thing. They think these layoffs now mean a pivot for sure. A pivot. The market is still pricing in a pivot on the Fed. What that means is that the Fed will reverse course and start backing off on the interest rates, in effect, creating a more accommodative market or quantitative easing. Even at this moment, even though our interest rates have already been hiked near 5%, we're still in an accommodative market. That's because inflation is still higher than the interest rates. So we're in a net negative position. So right now, even though everyone is suffering and everyone's paying more for that suffering, we're not in a great position. We're still stoking the flames of inflation. And while a lot of people are looking at potentially a what they call a disinflation movement to continue, that's a little bit different than deflation. A disinflation movement is one where the rate at which inflation is moving has now decreased. So there's a negative rate of decrease. It's still inflation, and it's still going up, just not going up as fast. So that's what disinflation is. Deflation is where inflation is actually going down, and we're not even anywhere close to that. So, but that's what the market is trying to price in right now. All right. So hopefully this has been informative and tells a little bit about how we are planning on approaching the market. It's pretty simple. We take our positions early in the day because that's when we can get the cheapest price. It's also when we can, I guess you can make an argument that it's also when we can garner the maximum amount of premium. But it's really the price that gives us the premium, not necessarily the time of the day. And that price is dictated by the amount of implied volatility. On Wednesday, we'll probably wait, probably fairly close until 2 o'clock, maybe wait until noontime or 1 o'clock before we put on a position, because we'll be able to. And that will give us a lot more leeway, be able to get closer to the market. And then Thursday, we'll continue the way we do always. All right. So if you like that, again, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment below, subscribe. Thank you very much. We're going into the weekend. Finally, a regular weekend. Peace to you all. Love you. Now it's time for the music. We'll see you Monday.